Hi, thank you all for being here. This is my first time at this conference, so I had to kind of shape my messages to who I think you all are. But this research study is about the intention to adapt virtual reality across levels of immersion. And I guess I really should, I should give credit to my colleague Max Fowler, who just got his PhD at University of Chicago, or University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and is now faculty there. But when we worked on it, he was a student in my lab. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Alicia Hayes, and I run a research lab called SurgeXR. And in that lab, we look at, the name SURGE stands for Simulation, User Research, thank you, Game Experience. And it is what it says. So in my lab, those are the things we look at. And specifically, I'm looking at XR, not just VR. So some of my recent projects, just to give you an idea of the frame, 360 videos in journalism trauma classes, so looking at how we can engage students using 360 video. Then a user experience test of Greenland melting 360 videos across flat screen and VR experiences, where we found that intention to change your behavior was higher when people experienced the same experience in VR, which you may expect. A lot of my research is about quantifying things that we anecdotally maybe hope are true, but we don't know that they're true in our field. And then I'm also doing a lot of design work on creating mixed reality and virtual reality tools for education and training. Oh, thanks. So when I talk about levels of immersion, I feel like most people are on this page, but just in case we're not, I'm looking at things all the way from 2.5D screens, so like World of Warcraft, all the way to highly immersive interactive virtual reality and highly interactive immersive augmented reality. Now, you may argue with me which one goes where, and I argue with myself about this also. But for me, right now, here's an example of what I think of as highly immersive interactive virtual experiences, things that engage all of our senses. And I will tell you why we care, but also just because, isn't this the greatest? I got to be immersed as a fish in this game called B-Bait at IEEE VR, I think back in 2019. And what was really great also was the haptic feedback, which maybe you'll get to, maybe I'll skip to, where the shark bites you and they give you that haptic feedback. So just as inspiration, particularly if anyone from Pixar is here, you should find these people because I want to do that all the time. But all of this leads me to my guiding research question and all of my research, which is, when do we need different levels of immersion? Like long term, I'd love to create a taxonomy, but right now I'm starting with small research studies to look at when different levels of immersion are effective. And one of the big limitations to this, as I'm sure you all know, are the fact that many research studies are done with small things that we have our students make in Unreal or Unity. They're not AAA games, they're not high quality experiences. So can we really generalize from these experiences that our students are making in a semester to what industry can expect? So, given that limitation, I looked at the immersive interactive game Elite Dangerous because it has been created by game developers, by a whole studio, Frontier Development, and then optimized for VR. And with this taxonomy, you have to ask the question, well, when I ask which is better, how do I know? So there's all these metrics that we should be thinking about. There are many more, but these are my guiding metrics. I generally tell my students, if you're looking at a tool and you want to evaluate it, particularly if it's an immersive tool, obviously you want to evaluate immersion. Presence is that sense of being there. Social presence is connection. Realism, fidelity, I think everyone here is pretty familiar with things, how realistic they are visually, functionally. And then we also want to look at if it's a learning experience, which this is not, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Learning, transfer, changing attitudes and behaviors. But then the thing that gets back to all people, all users, games, social, professional, or training, access? Who has access to the technology, like many of us have experienced, the lack of internet down here, kind of shifting our presentation styles. Novelty is the question that we're always asking, like, well, if you put it in VR, that's novelty. Isn't that good enough? And maybe. It depends on who you're talking about and how long that novelty effect is going to last. And then, of course, costs. So with the game Elite Dangerous, for instance, only people who have a high-quality computer and an Oculus can experience this in immersive technology. And then, of course, comfort, which I'm sure anyone who's been working in VR knows. I kind of already defined presence, so we're going to skip this slide in the interest of time. Oh, great, and there's even a timer in front of me. This is great. So this is what the game Elite Dangerous looks like. And it is a really realistic, procedurally generated version of the Milky Way galaxy, so people can fly for hours and hours and hours, and they really do, and experience the Milky Way galaxy. And there are different levels of immersion because you can play it on a flat screen. You can also play it in VR. It's not really interesting to show, but you can imagine that guy with a VR headset on playing the game in the same way. You can also increase the level of fidelity by the fact that they have many high-quality flight sticks for people who are really, really into using flight controls. But for my study, we just used mouse and keyboard with the WASD to control the environment. Had 25 participants, and they played Elite Dangerous, just the tutorial, so it's just a 15-minute tutorial. Some people just experienced the VR and the Oculus Rift. Some participants just experienced the VR on the flat screen, and some participants experienced it, the flat screen, followed immediately by the Oculus Rift. And the reason why we did this is because I was just wondering how the experience would change if people, the outcome actually surprised me. I thought it might change like their comfort, honestly, is what I was expecting. Like if you experience it low fidelity and then high fidelity, it might make it easier for you to learn the game, is what I was expecting. My outcomes were not what I expected. Physical presence, so that sense of being there, was higher in the Oculus in both conditions. Spatial presence, so actually being able to determine things around you, so not just being there, but determining things in your space, was also higher, obviously, in the Oculus. And you see the mean in the Oculus and the Oculus After are the same. But the variation in the Oculus group is higher. Immersion, as you might expect, was also higher in the Oculus and the Oculus After experience. And realism was rated oddly higher in the Oculus After the monitor than it was in just the Oculus condition, which was another surprise for me. But I guess another kind of surprise was user self-report of comfort was the same. And I would kind of, since we are limited on time, I would kind of say that this is a limitation of the study because it was only 15 minutes, because I've played Elite Dangerous in a headset, and after about 30 minutes of being in a headset, I can't stand it anymore. But these people only used it for 15 minutes, so I'm not going to believe that there's not a statistically significant difference. I think my study just does not capture it. But the biggest thing that surprised me, because it was just a question that I asked. I didn't even care about the answer. User self-report of intent to adopt VR. So at the end, we asked people, do you want to buy VR now? And somehow, the people who experienced the Oculus after the monitor were statistically significantly more likely to want to buy VR, which I didn't really understand until I kind of reflected on it, and probably we need to do more studies on this. But when I asked people, they were like, well, I hadn't really thought about the difference. But then when I saw the flat screen and then I saw the VR, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so much better. So there's something to be said about the ways that we're thinking about presenting this information. This is just for you guys to take a quick peek at, I asked them open-ended questions. I'll probably write about this later. But open-ended questions at the end of their experience. and this was the word cloud that came from it, but I can tell you comfort was a thing that came up, and their reflections, like that they could see through the headset and that bothered them, or that it was hard to use the controls with the headset on, these kinds of things that you might expect. So what are the implications of this? So for me, even though I'm not a commercial person, I do spend a lot of money. So I can say one of the commercial implications that, and I will backtrack and say, this study was done before the pandemic. And one of the commercial implications that I would say is perhaps shifting the way that we do demos so that people can see the difference of the levels of immersion that they're gaining from devices, because maybe they're not really seeing, kind of like the demo, I didn't really know that there was a difference between an X-ray and a 3D X-ray until you showed us. And if you just showed me the 3D X-ray, I would have been like, okay. But when you show the difference and the advance, I think it does have an impact. So perhaps that will have an implication on sales. But for me, since I run a lab on education and training, the implications are about scaffolding, right? Perhaps engaging students and scaffolded learning where they have lower levels of immersion and then higher levels of immersion, or maybe where a higher level of immersion is a reward, that kind of a thing. Anticipating user differences, because you saw the user experiences were quite different, and also giving options. Like when I explained earlier that I create education, technology, and games, one of the things I didn't mention is that everything I create, I try to make cross-platform. So not just a VR experience, because if you're looking at education and training, it really is disadvantaging students if you're creating some highly immersive interactive experience and you're not thinking about how to engage people who have cyber sickness or other stimulus issues, like some students with autism don't like to wear headsets. So if we're not designing things across user types, then we're really, while we think we're democratizing things, maybe adding new barriers. Thank you. Are there any questions?